Childhood pain doesn't always come from the absence of love. Sometimes it comes from being loved the wrong way. Many parents truly care for their children. They want them to succeed, to be safe, to become someone others admire. Yet love can slowly transform into something that wounds, not because it is absent, but because it becomes conditional. Control often appears as guidance. A parent might say they know what's best, but beneath those choices, the child learns one message: I don't trust you to decide for yourself. Comparison hides behind motivation. When a child constantly hears about someone else doing better, the unspoken truth sinks in: you're not enough as you are. And pressure to succeed wears the mask of encouragement. The child tries harder and harder, not from passion, but because failing feels like disappointing the very people they love most. To a child, love is everything. So when love becomes a test, they stop listening to their heart and start chasing approval. They abandon their own voice just to be seen as worthy. They become excellent, responsible, high-achieving, but often not happy. Inside, they're afraid that without success, they will lose their value, that they will lose love. And this pain doesn't disappear with age. It grows into adults who don't know how to rest, who feel guilty when they're not productive, who measure their worth by achievements, numbers, praise, perfection. They don't fear failure itself. They fear what failure might say about their worth. Real love shouldn't demand perfection. It should give a child space to be imperfect, confused, curious, creative, and human. Because the greatest gift a child can receive is not success, but the freedom to become themselves. Many high-achieving adults aren't chasing dreams. They're chasing validation they never received as children. From the outside, they look driven, disciplined, ambitious. They wake up early, stay late, push harder than anyone else. People admire their success, but rarely understand where it truly comes from. It's not passion alone. It's not even ambition. It's a quiet fear, the fear of not being enough. As children, they learn that attention must be earned. Praise came only after achievement, never for simply existing. Maybe their parents celebrated grades more than feelings. Maybe they were the responsible one, expected to be strong even when they were hurting. Maybe they heard again and again how someone else's child was smarter, faster, more talented. Over time, love began to feel conditional, a reward rather than a birthright. So they grew up believing that worth must be proven, noticed, measured, displayed. Now as adults, they set bigger goals not because they truly want them, but because slowing down feels unsafe. Rest feels like failure. Success feels like oxygen. The world sees confidence, but inside, there is a child still trying to be seen. These adults rarely celebrate their wins. They achieve something and immediately ask, what's next? Because every victory fades too quickly and the hunger for validation remains. They don't know how to sit still with themselves, how to feel loved without performing for it. The tragedy is not that they work hard. Hard work can be beautiful. The tragedy is that they've never been taught they are valuable, even when they stop trying. True healing begins when they realize that worth is not earned, it's inherent. That love is not a trophy for achievement, but a home they have always deserved. And maybe for the first time, they can begin chasing dreams they actually want. Emotional numbness in adulthood is often born from childhood neglect, not hate, but indifference. Many children don't grow up in homes filled with violence or cruelty. Instead, they grow up in homes where their feelings are simply unnoticed. No one asked what scared them. No one listened when they were sad. Their achievements were acknowledged, but their emotions were invisible. And invisibility leaves deeper scars than punishment. Neglect is not always loud. It can be quiet, subtle. A parent too busy, too tired, too distracted, or simply uninterested in the child's inner world. They provided food, shelter, education, rules, everything except emotional presence. And so the child learned to silence their needs, not because they were strong, but because there was no one willing to hear them. As adults, these children do not lack emotions. They lack permission to feel them. They become logical, composed, independent, praised for being so mature. But maturity built on loneliness is not strength. It's survival. They struggle to express love, to receive it, to ask for help. They don't cry easily. They don't break down. They don't trust that vulnerability will be met with care. So they shut down before they're even aware of it. They avoid deep connections because they don't believe their feelings matter. They stay silent in relationships, not out of peace, but out of fear that their emotional needs might burden someone. They are often mistaken for cold or distant, when in truth, no one ever taught them how to be open. The absence of emotional attention in childhood becomes emotional numbness in adulthood. Healing starts not by forcing yourself to feel, but by learning that your feelings deserve a witness, that your voice is worth hearing, and that quiet neglect was never your fault. Lonely children escape into imagination, not to run away, but to survive. Fantasy becomes a safe home when reality isn't. Some children don't grow up with abuse or chaos. They grow up with emotional emptiness. They aren't held when they're scared, they aren't listened to when they speak, and their joys or sadness pass unnoticed. So they turn to the one place where someone will pay attention to them, their own mind. Imagination becomes a friend when no one else shows up. Stories take the shape of comfort. Invisible worlds offer warmth when real rooms feel cold. These children create characters who understand them, adventures where they matter, and universes where they finally feel seen. Daydreaming isn't laziness, it's protection, a quiet rebellion against a world that does not give them a place to belong. As they grow older, their creativity becomes both a gift and a shield. They write, draw, build, dream, not just for fun, but to stay alive in a world that once ignored their feelings. Their imagination becomes a language of survival, turning pain into poetry and loneliness into art. They see beauty others miss. They sense hidden meanings. They understand emotions deeply because they've spent years living inside them. But this refuge can become a prison too. When real life feels disappointing, unpredictable, or unsafe, they retreat back into their inner world. They struggle to trust reality, to trust people, to believe they can be loved outside of imagination. They long for connection, but fear it might disappear as easily as a dream. Healing begins not by abandoning fantasy, but by learning that the real world can hold pieces of beauty too. That imagination was a home, but it doesn't have to be the only one. And that a child who survived through dreams deserves a reality where they no longer need to escape. People who grew up reading emotions too early aren't overthinking. They were forced to notice tiny changes to stay safe. Some children develop emotional intelligence not from love, but from fear. They learn to read the energy of the room the way others learn to read books. They memorize the sound of footsteps, the tone of a voice, the look in someone's eyes, because their safety depends on it. Before they ever learned multiplication or grammar, they learned how to predict anger, disappointment, and emotional storms. These children become masters of scanning. A slight change in facial expression, a sigh a little too heavy, a silence a little too long, they notice it instantly. Not because they're sensitive, but because they were trained to be alert. Hypervigilance becomes a skill, one they never asked for but couldn't survive without. When love is unpredictable, attention becomes a shield. Awareness becomes protection. As adults, they're praised for being intuitive, empathetic, emotionally wise. People come to them for advice, comfort, understanding. Yet behind that strength is exhaustion. They enter relationships already analyzing, decoding, anticipating. They know how others feel before they know what they themselves feel. They apologize too quickly, forgive too easily, and blame themselves for things that aren't theirs to carry. Their mind doesn't race because they're dramatic. It races because slowing down once meant danger. They don't replay conversations from insecurity, but from habit, trying to make sure they didn't miss a threat. They offer peace to others because they spent a lifetime trying to prevent conflict. Healing for them isn't about shutting off awareness, but learning they don't have to use it to survive anymore. They can rest. They can feel without fear. They can exist without scanning the room. They deserve relationships where safety is given, not earned. Adults who fear love aren't afraid of people. They're afraid of being hurt again by the same kind of love that shaped them. When you grow up with a love that wounds, you learn that affection can be dangerous. Maybe love was strict, unpredictable, controlling, or full of expectations. Maybe it demanded obedience more than understanding, achievements more than joy, perfection more than honesty. So as a child, you learn that love was something you had to earn, not protect yourself from, or shrink yourself to keep. As adults, These same people don't avoid relationships because they dislike closeness. They avoid them because closeness feels risky. Vulnerability reminds them of how easily love can turn into pressure, silence, criticism, or abandonment. They fear the moment when affection changes tone, when kindness becomes judgment, when warmth turns into coldness, just like it did before. So they build walls, not to keep love out, but to keep themselves safe. They choose partners they don't deeply care about, because heartbreak feels easier when the heart isn't truly involved. They keep things casual, detached, controlled. They crave intimacy, yet panic when it becomes real. They push away the very love they long for, not because they don't want it, but because they're terrified of repeating the same pain. These adults aren't emotionally unavailable by choice. They're protecting the child inside them who never felt safe loving freely. Healing doesn't come from forcing yourself to open up quickly or from pretending you don't care. Healing begins with recognizing that fear was once a form of survival. Love shouldn't require walking on eggshells. It shouldn't demand shrinking yourself to be accepted. Real love doesn't feel like losing your voice. It feels like finally having one. And the right kind of love won't repeat the story that hurt you. Pain isn't a punishment. It's a call to transformation. Some scars don't destroy. They teach empathy and become the reason we heal others. Not all suffering is meant to break us. Sometimes it arrives as a teacher, disguised as loss, rejection, loneliness, or disappointment. Pain forces us to pause, reflect, and confront parts of ourselves we once ignored. It shapes our values, deepens our compassion, and sharpens our understanding of what truly matters. If comfort keeps us asleep, pain wakes us up. Some of the kindest people didn't become that way because life was gentle to them. They became gentle because they know what it feels like to be hurt, misunderstood, or unseen. Their empathy isn't a personality trait, it's an inheritance from their past. Scars make them curious about other people's feelings. Wounds teach them how to listen without judgment. They don't invalidate pain because they remember how much that silence stung. These scars don't define them as broken, they define them as aware. The same experiences that once caused suffering now give them the capacity to console, protect, and nurture others. What once hurt them becomes the wisdom that helps someone else survive. This is the beauty of transformation. The wound stops bleeding and becomes a source of strength. Healing doesn't mean erasing what happened. It means using what happened differently. Instead of letting pain dictate who we become, we allow it to refine us. We stop asking, why did this happen to me? And begin asking, how can this shape me into someone better? Pain is not the end of the story. It may be the beginning of purpose. Scars are not reminders of weakness. They are proof that we grew, endured, and learned how to love more deeply. Sometimes, the very hurt we survived becomes the reason someone else finally feels safe.